They claimed there was no bed left. Despite 3 empty cots sitting behind the glass, I walked out ready to sleep in my car, only to find a vintage Lincoln at the curb containing the grandfather my family swore was dead. He held the proof to burn their charity empire down. They did not just reject me, they accidentally activated the one clause putting me in charge of every key, every bed, and every single dollar they have been stealing. My name is Hannah Sanders. I am 27 years old, and for the past 6 months, I have measured my life in quarters, spin cycles, and the amount of gas left in the tank of a sedan that is older than I am. I work the graveyard shift at a 24-hour laundromat in Summit Falls, Oregon. A job that pays me just enough to keep starving to death at arm's length, but not enough to secure a roof that does not leak or have wheels attached to it. The rain in Summit Falls does not wash things clean. It just makes the grime stick harder. It was a Tuesday night, and the temperature had dropped to 34 degrees. Hovering in that miserable space where the air hurts your face but the ground is too warm for snow. I parked my car 3 blocks away from the Harbor Springs Hope Center because I did not want anyone to see my license plate and know that the girl asking for a cot was the same one who slept in the parking lot of the industrial park. I grabbed a black trash bag containing my toothbrush, a change of underwear, and a flannel shirt, and I walked toward the light of the shelter. This was not my first time walking up these concrete steps. It was not even my third. The Harbor Springs Hope Center was a fortress of beige stucco and good intentions, or at least that is what the brochure said. I pushed through the heavy glass doors and was hit by the smell of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. It was the smell of charity that had gone sour. Sharon was behind the intake desk. Sharon had been there the last time, and the time before that. She was a woman who looked like she had been exhausted since 1995. When she saw me approaching the plexiglass window, her shoulders dropped about 2 inches. It was not a gesture of welcome. It was the body language of someone preparing to deliver bad news to a persistent stray dog. I placed my ID on the counter. My hands were shaking, not just from the cold, but from the humiliation that sat in my stomach like a stone. I need a bed for the night. Sharon, I said, keeping my voice low, just for tonight. It is freezing out there, and my car heater died 3 days ago. Sharon did not pick up my ID. She just looked at it, then looked at her computer screen, and finally looked at me with a gaze that was equal parts pity and annoyance. It is the same as last week. Hannah, she said, her voice thick with that professional sympathy they teach in orientation. The list is extremely long tonight. We are at capacity. My eyes shifted past her shoulder. Behind the frosted glass partition that separated the intake area from the sleeping quarters, I could see the rows of cots. The room was dim, lit only by the blue glow of exit signs, but I could see them clearly. There were 3 beds in the corner nearest the window. They were perfectly made. The white sheets were taut. The gray wool blankets were folded in precise squares at the foot of each one. They were empty. I see 3 empty beds right there. Sharon, I said, pointing at the glass. Sharon shifted in her chair, blocking my view with her body. Those are reserved, she said. Reserved for whom I asked. It is 11 o'clock at night. Who is checking in at this hour? She did not answer. Instead, she picked up the phone on her desk. I knew who she was calling. I knew the number by heart because it used to be posted on the refrigerator of the house where I spent my childhood Christmases. She was calling the director. She was calling Aunt Lydia. I watched Sharon speak in hushed tones. Her hand cupped around the receiver. I could not hear everything, but in the quiet of the lobby, the words drifted through the gap in the glass. I heard my name. Then I heard Sharon pause, listening to the voice on the other end. Then came the sentence that cut through the remaining hope I was holding on to. She is asking again. Sharon whispered, Yes, I understand. Okay, I will write it down. Not stable enough for community housing. She hung up the phone and turned back to me. Her face was hardened now. The pity was gone, replaced by the cold efficiency of someone following orders. I spoke to the director, Sharon said, refusing to say the name. We reviewed your file. You do not meet the criteria for intake tonight. We have concerns about your stability in a communal setting. Stability. I worked 40 hours a week. I had never been arrested. I did not drink. My only instability was that my last name was Sanders, and the woman running this building had decided that my branch of the family tree needed to be pruned until it withered. Please, I said, and I hated the beg in my voice. I will not talk to anyone. I just need to sleep somewhere that isn't 30 degrees. I can leave at 5 in the morning before anyone wakes up. Sharon shook her head. She pointed a manicured finger toward the glass doors. You cannot stay here. Hannah, she said. Can I just sit in the lobby, I asked. Just on the plastic chairs. I won't go into the sleeping area. Just let me stay out of the wind for an hour. Sharon sighed and stood up. She smoothed down her cardigan. This is not a waiting room, she said. Policy is policy. If you are not an admitted guest, you cannot loiter on the premises. You have to leave the building. Hannah, now, or I have to call security. I looked at her. I looked at the empty beds behind her. I grabbed my trash bag off the counter. The plastic crinkled loud in the silent lobby. I turned around and walked out. The wind hit me the second the door closed behind me. It was wetter and colder than before. I stood under the small concrete overhang of the entrance, shivering. My chest felt hot, a burning sensation that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with the rage boiling in my blood. It was a familiar feeling. I remembered being 7 years old, lying on the hardwood floor of my grandmother's living room during Thanksgiving. My cousins, Lydia's children, were sitting on the plush leather sofas. My mother and I had been given pillows and told that the seating was limited. I remembered looking up at the underside of the coffee table, tracing the grain of the wood, listening to them laugh above me. They had always kept us on the floor. They had always made sure we knew our place was temporary, conditional, and beneath them, tonight was no different. They had just moved the floor from the living room to the street. I pulled my thin coat tighter around me and stepped out from the overhang. I needed to get back to my car. I needed to run the engine for 10 minutes to get enough heat to fall asleep before the fuel gauge dropped too low. That was when I saw the car. It was parked directly in front of the shelter entrance, in the loading zone painted yellow. It was a Lincoln Continental, a vintage model from the 60s, painted a dark, midnight blue that looked black under the street lamps. It was pristine, rainwater beaded on the waxed hood like diamonds. In a line of rusted hatchbacks and dented pickups belonging to the staff and the desperate, this car looked like a visitor from another planet. It looked like money. It looked like power. I kept my head down, intending to walk past it. I did not want to look at anyone who could afford a car like that, but as I drew level with the passenger window, I felt eyes on me. I glanced sideways. Behind the rain-slicked glass, an old man sat in the driver's seat. He was striking. He had hair the color of sterling silver, combed back in a style that belonged to a different era. He wore a dark wool coat with the collar turned up. He was not looking at his phone. He was not looking at the traffic. He was looking directly at me. He did not look away when our eyes met. Most people look away from the homeless. We make them uncomfortable. We remind them of how fragile their own luck is. But this man stared at me with an intensity that felt physical. He was not looking at me with pity, like Sharon. He was looking at me the way a mechanic looks at an engine that is making a strange noise, assessing, calculating, diagnosing. I gripped my trash bag tighter and walked faster. I just wanted to get to the darkness of the parking lot. Then the passenger door of the Lincoln swung open. The interior light clicked on, casting a warm yellow glow onto the wet pavement. I stopped. I could not help it. The warmth radiating from the car was palpable. Hannah Sanders, the man said. His voice was deep, gravelly, and sounded like it had been cured in smoke and whiskey for 80 years. It was not a question. It was a statement. I turned to face him. The rain was matting my hair to my forehead. "Who are you?" I asked. Stepping back. "I do not know you." The man leaned across the leather bench seat, up close. His face was a map of deep lines and sharp angles. He looked like a hawk that had decided to wear human clothes for the evening. "Get in." "Hannah," he said, "you are freezing. I am not getting in a car with a stranger." I snapped. I might be poor, but I am not stupid. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who knows the punchline to a joke you have not heard yet. I am hardly a stranger, he said. I am August Caldwell. The name hit me harder than the wind. I took a step back, nearly tripping over the curb. August Caldwell was dead. My mother had told me he died 10 years ago. Aunt Lydia had wept at a memorial service that I was not allowed to attend because my clothes were not black enough. We had visited a grave. I had seen the stone. My grandfather is dead, I said, my voice trembling. We buried him. They buried an empty casket and a lot of secrets. Hannah, he said calmly. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a heavy yellow manila envelope. It was thick, stuffed with papers. He tossed it onto the passenger seat. It landed with a heavy thud. They just pushed you out of the shelter. Didn't they? He asked. How do you know that I asked? Because I know my daughter, he said, and I know how this family operates. They prune the branches they do not like. He tapped a manicured finger on the envelope. I have been waiting for this moment for a long time. Hannah, he said, tonight, they made a mistake. A very expensive mistake. I looked at the envelope, then back at his face. He looked like the pictures I had seen in old albums, the ones my mother kept hidden in a shoebox. He had the same steel gray eyes. I do not want your money, I said, finding my resolve. I do not take charity, not from strangers, and definitely not from ghosts. August Caldwell laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. Good, he said, because this is not money, and I'm not offering you charity. He picked up the envelope and held it out toward me, half hanging out of the open door. This is evidence, he said. I hesitated. The rain was soaking through my coat now, chilling me to the bone. But the heat coming from the car, and the heat coming from his words, held me there. I reached out and took the envelope. It was heavy in my hands. Good girl, he said. Behind me, the automatic doors of the Hope Center slid open and then closed as someone exited. I turned slightly. Through the glass, I could see Sharon watching us, her face pressed against the window. Above her head, mounted on the beige wall in polished brass letters, was the logo, the Mercer Caldwell Housing Foundation. Mercer was my mother's maiden name. Caldwell was his. It was the name that was plastered on half the buildings in this city. It was the name on the hospital wing, the library, and this shelter. It was the name that was supposed to mean protection. I looked back at the old man in the Lincoln. He was watching me look at the sign. Do you know what that sign means? Hannah, he asked. It means they own everything. I said bitterly. No, he said. It means they think they own everything. He leaned back into the shadows of the driver's seat, his hand resting on the gear shift. Answer me one question. Hannah, he said. His voice dropped lower, becoming serious and deadly. Are you tired yet? He asked. Are you tired of standing on the porch, shivering in the cold, right in front of a door that has your own family's name written on it, and still being told there is no room for you inside? I looked at the brass letters. I looked at the empty beds visible through the window, the ones Lydia had ordered to be kept empty rather than let me soil them. I felt the weight of the envelope in my hands. I looked at my grandfather. Yes, I said, I am tired. Then read the file. August said, and when you are ready to stop sleeping in your car, you will know what to do. He reached over and pulled the passenger door shut. The lock clicked with a sound like a gunshot. The Lincoln purred to life, the engine a low rumble that vibrated in the soles of my wet shoes. He did not wave. He did not look back. He just put the car in gear and pulled away from the curb. The dark blue paint swallowing the streetlights as he disappeared into the rain, leaving me standing there with a bomb in a yellow envelope. I climbed back into the driver's seat of my sedan, the leather of the vintage Lincoln still burning a phantom warmth into my memory. My car smelled like mildew and stale fast food, a sharp contrast to the rich scent of cedar and old money that had wafted from August Caldwell's coat. I locked the doors. It was a habit born of sleeping in parking lots where shadows moved too quickly. My hands were trembling so badly, I dropped the heavy yellow envelope onto the passenger seat. Part of me wanted to open the door and shove the envelope into the nearest trash can. I told myself it was hush money. I told myself it was a bribe to keep the poor relation quiet, so she did not embarrass the dynasty by freezing to death on their doorstep. I had my pride, even if I did not have a heater. I reached for the ignition, fully intending to drive away and forget the ghost I had just met. But hunger is a curious thing. It makes you desperate, but curiosity makes you dangerous. I picked up the envelope. It was not sealed. I slid my hand inside, expecting the dry friction of cash. Instead, my fingers brushed against glossy photo paper and the sharp edges of stapled documents. I pulled the stack out under the dim yellow dome light of my car. There was no cash, not a single dollar bill. The first page was a bank statement. It was printed on heavy stock, the kind banks use for their preferred clients. The header read, Caldwell Urban Renewal Trust, and below that, a sub-account titled, Housing Stipend Disbursement, Hannah Sanders. I stared at my name. It looked foreign in that font, official and important. I scanned the columns. Date October 1st, amount $2,500. Date November 1st, amount $2,500. Date December 1st, amount $2,500. My breath caught in my throat. For 5 years, this account had been generating a monthly check for $2,500. That was enough for a studio apartment in the nice part of Summit Falls. That was enough for heat. That was enough for food that did not come from a microwave. I flipped the page to see where the money went. I expected to see a mistake. I expected to see a savings account I did not know about. Recipient Rebecca Mercer Personal Checking. Recipient Lydia Mercer Vane Joint Account. My mother and my aunt. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to roll down the window to get cold air on my face. They had been cashing checks in my name since I was 22. Every month that I had called my mother, crying because I was short on rent. She had told me that money was tight, that the family was overextended, that I needed to learn responsibility. She had lectured me on the virtue of struggle while she deposited $2,500 of my lifeline into her account. I dug deeper into the pile. It got worse. There were photocopies of expense reports from the Mercer Caldwell Housing Foundation. August or whoever had compiled this had highlighted specific lines in neon yellow. Item VIP guest suite renovation. Cost $12,000. Source of funds H. Sanders stipend accumulation. Item gala catering. Platinum package. Cost $4,500. Source of funds H. Sanders stipend. Item Summit Falls Country Club. Annual membership dues. Lydia Mercer Vane. Cost $8,000. Source of funds discretionary H. Sanders allocation. I looked at the date on the country club charge. It was from last winter. I remembered that winter. It was the month my transmission blew out, and I had to walk 4 miles to the laundromat in the snow because I could not afford a tow truck. I had called Aunt Lydia asking to borrow $50 for a space heater. She had told me that handouts create dependency. She had paid for her golf membership with the money meant to keep me off the street. I dropped the papers. My hands were shaking for a different reason now. The cold outside was nothing compared to the ice spreading through my veins. At the bottom of the envelope, something rattled. I reached in and pulled out a white plastic key card and a heavy, old-fashioned steel key. There was a small white card attached to them with a paperclip. It read, Unit B14, Lockside Archives. Below that was a business card. Jade Monroe, paralegal, strategic research. On the back of the business card, in confident, jagged handwriting. August had written, when you are ready to stop sleeping in your car, call her. I checked the time on my dashboard. It was just past midnight. The laundromat did not need me until the next shift, and there was no way I was sleeping tonight. The adrenaline pumping through me felt like I had swallowed a live wire. I put the car in gear. I knew where Lockside Archives was. It was a massive, windowless concrete facility down by the river, where law firms and medical centers stored the records they legally had to keep, but never wanted to look at. It was cold, sterile, and expensive. The drive took 20 minutes. The rain had turned into a sleet that hissed against my windshield. When I pulled up to the electronic gate of the storage facility, I rolled down my window and held up the white keycard to the reader. I held my breath, half expecting an alarm to blare. The reader beeped a cheerful green. The heavy iron gate rolled back with a mechanical groan. I drove through, the facility emerging from the fog like a mausoleum. I parked in front of the building marked B. The steel key opened the side door. Inside, the air was climate-controlled and smelled of dust and dead trees. The silence was absolute. I walked down the long corridor, the fluorescent lights flickering to life overhead as motion sensors tracked my movement. Unit B14 was at the end of the hall. I unlocked the door and shoved it open. It was not a small storage locker. It was a room. Floor-to-ceiling metal shelving units lined every wall, packed tight with white bankers' boxes. Every single box bore the logo of the Mercer Caldwell Housing Foundation. This was not just a few papers. This was the graveyard of their secrets. I walked to the nearest shelf. The boxes were labeled by year and department. I found a section labeled Stipends and Beneficiaries. There was a box marked HS, Housing Stipend. I pulled the lid off. Inside, it was not just bank statements. It was a chronicle of my life, viewed through the lens of their theft. There were Excel spreadsheets printed out on landscape paper. Column A, Hannah allowance. Column B, actual payment. Column C, justification. Under justification, for 3 years straight, someone Lydia. I recognized her handwriting had written beneficiary whereabouts unknown, funds redirected to administrative overhead, whereabouts unknown. I had been working at the laundromat 3 miles from her house. I had sent her a Christmas card every year with my return address on the envelope. I found a folder of emails. They were printed out and stapled in chronological order, from Lydia Mercer Vane to Rebecca Mercer. Subject: the Sanders problem. Body: she is asking about the trust again. We cannot let her know there is an active allocation. If she finds out she has a $2,500 monthly draw, she will stop working those night shifts and might actually try to go back to school. We need to keep her hungry. Becca: hunger builds character. Plus, we need that cash flow to cover the deposit on the new event space. Mark her as non-compliant. I sat down on the cold concrete floor. I was surrounded by boxes, but I felt like I was drowning. 5 years, 60 months. That was $150,000. They had stolen $150,000 from me while watching me eat instant noodles at family gatherings. I had spent nights debating whether to buy gas or milk. I had slept in this car when it was 5 degrees below zero, wrapping myself in newspapers because I could not afford a blanket. And the whole time, they were using my survival money to renovate guest suites I was not allowed to stay in. My eyes wandered to a separate shelf, isolated from the rest. There was a single red binder there. It looked older than the others. The spine cracked and faded. The label read, Caldwell Urban Renewal Trust, 2002 Governance, Section 14. I stood up and took the binder. I opened it on top of a stack of boxes. The pages were thick, legal-grade paper. I flipped past sections about board appointments and fiscal years until I found it, Article 14, Beneficiary Rights and Protections. I ran my finger down the page until I hit Clause 14.3. Someone August had flagged it with a red sticky note labeled Shelter Trigger. The legal language was dense, but I had spent enough time reading eviction notices to understand the rhythm of fine print. It read, in the event that a direct lineal descendant of the founder is denied shelter at any facility fully or partially funded by the trust, and said descendant can demonstrate a period of independent, self-sustaining income for a continuous period of no less than 6 months, the voting rights associated with the founder's shares regarding all housing and shelter operations shall temporarily transfer to said descendant. I read it twice, then a third time, transfer of voting rights. It did not say I would get money. It said I would get power. Pinned to the center of the page was a piece of yellow legal pad paper. The handwriting was the same jagged scrawl from the business card. It was dated 8 years ago. The note read, the person with the least sleep has the loudest voice in this family. If they ever lock you out, Hannah, this clause is the key to the lock. I stared at the date. 8 years ago. August had written this before everyone said he died. He had written this when I was just starting to struggle. A cold realization washed over me. This was not an accident. My rejection tonight was not just Lydia being cruel. It was a mechanism. August had set a trap. A bear trap made of bylaws and legal clauses. And he had used me as the bait. He knew they would reject me. He knew they were greedy. He knew that if he gave them the money intended for me, they would steal it. And he knew that eventually, I would show up at that shelter door, desperate and freezing, and they would turn me away. He had watched me suffer for years. He had watched me sleep in my car. He had tracked my employment, my shifts at the laundromat, my struggle. He had let it happen. Why? Because he needed me to be the victim so I could become the executioner. The shock began to fade, replaced by something harder, something colder. It was a different kind of anger than what I had felt outside the shelter. That had been hot. Reactive rage. This was icy. This was precise. They had not just abandoned me, they had built their entire charitable empire on my back. Every gala they threw, every ribbon they cut, every speech they gave about helping the less fortunate, it was all funded by the money they stole from the granddaughter they left in the cold. They thought I was trash. They thought I was a liability to be managed, a stain to be hidden. They did not know I was the fail-safe. I reached into the pocket of the red binder. There was one last piece of paper, folded small. I unfolded it. It contained just 3 words, written in that same commanding script. Do not sue, govern. I looked at the walls of boxes. I looked at the evidence of 5 years of systematic abuse. I looked at the binder that gave me the right to burn it all down. I closed the binder. The sound was loud in the empty room. I was not going to sue them for the money. A lawsuit would take years. They had lawyers. They had delays. They could settle. No, August was right. I picked up the business card for Jade Monroe. I checked the time. It was early morning now. The sun would be coming up soon. I was done sleeping in the car. It was time to wake up. The text message came at 6 in the morning. Just as I was folding the last load of oversized comforters at the laundromat, it was short, precise, and offered no room for negotiation. It simply read, Riverbend Diner, Booth 4, 7 o'clock. Do not be late. I did not go home to shower. I did not have a home to go to, and my car was currently parked 3 blocks away with a sunshade wedged in the window to hide the fact that I lived in it. I was wearing my blue polyblend uniform polo with the Suds Spin logo embroidered on the chest, and I smelled like dryer sheets and exhaustion. My eyes felt like they were filled with sand. I had not slept since the encounter outside the shelter. The Riverbend Diner was the kind of place that served breakfast all day and smelled permanently of bacon grease and floor wax. It was where the construction workers and third-shift nurses of Summit Falls ate. It was not the kind of place where men who drove vintage Lincoln Continentals usually dined. When I walked in, the bell above the door jingled aggressively. I spotted him immediately. August Caldwell was sitting in the back corner booth, far away from the windows. He looked absurdly out of place. He was wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than the entire diner's monthly revenue. Yet he sat there with a predatory stillness that made the vinyl bench seat look like a throne. There was a black coffee in front of him, steaming, and a thin manila folder. He did not stand up when he saw me. He did not wave. He just watched me walk across the checkered floor. I could feel his eyes cataloging every detail, the dark circles under my eyes, the wrinkle in my uniform, the way I held my purse close to my body, a habit of someone used to having their things stolen. It was a test. Even now, over breakfast, he was testing me. I slid into the booth opposite him. The vinyl squeaked. You look terrible, August said. It was not an insult. It was an observation. I have been awake for 24 hours, finding out my family has been robbing me for 5 years. I said, my voice raspy. I think I'm allowed to look tired. He signaled the waitress with a subtle lift of his finger. Coffee for her, he said. Black. She needs the caffeine more than the sugar. I waited until the waitress poured the mug and left before I leaned in. My anger had crystallized overnight into something sharp and heavy in my chest. I read the files. I said, "I assumed you would." He replied, taking a sip of his coffee. "You watched me," I said, my voice rising slightly before I caught myself. "You have been watching me for years. I saw the dates on those notes. You knew I was sleeping in a sedan when it was 10 degrees outside. You knew I was eating expired granola bars for dinner, and you just let it happen." August set his mug down. He did not blink. "I did not put you in that car. Hannah, your mother and your aunt did that. You could have stopped it," I hissed. "You are the founder. You could have made one phone call 5 years ago and given me the money, but you didn't. You let me suffer so you could test your little clause 14.3. August leaned forward. His expression remained impassive, but his eyes were hard flint. I gave them rope. Hannah, that is all I did. I handed them a long, golden rope in the form of a trust fund and administrative power. I wanted to see what they would do with it. They could have used it to pull you up. Instead, they used it to hang you outside on the porch. He opened the thin folder on the table. "That tells me everything I need to know about who deserves to hold the keys to the house," he said. He spun the folder around so I could see the top document. It was a diagram, drawn with architectural precision. "Let me explain how the machine works," he said. "The Caldwell Urban Renewal Trust is the engine. It holds the capital, the investments, the real estate assets. I set it up to be untouchable. The trust feeds the Mercer Caldwell Housing Foundation. That is the charitable arm. That is the face on the billboards." He tapped a finger on the box labeled Foundation. "Your Aunt Lydia runs the foundation as the executive director. Your mother, Rebecca, sits on the board and manages community outreach to the outside world. They are saints. They are the perfect charity managers. They wear the right clothes. They cry at the right times during fundraisers, and they talk endlessly about compassion." He flipped the page. It was a timeline. My stomach dropped when I saw my own name at the top. This was a surveillance log. January 12th. Subject parked at Walmart lot. Security moved her at 3 a.m. February 14th. Subject started night shift at Sud's Spin. March 3rd. Subject denied entry at Harbor Springs. Reason listed overcapacity. Actual capacity, 80%. He had documented every single low point of my adult life. "And this," August said, pointing to a column of numbers in red. "This is the part that impressed me." I looked at the numbers. $200, $150, $75. "What is this?" I asked. "These are the transfer records from your bank account to your mother's," August said. "Over the last 3 years. Even while living in your car, you sent money to Rebecca whenever she called crying about a bill. You sent her over $4,000 in total. I felt the blood drain from my face. She told me they were going to lose the house." I whispered. "She said the foundation was struggling. She said they needed help with the utilities. She lied," August said flatly. "At the exact moment you sent her $75 from your laundry wages, she was using the foundation credit card to buy a $1,200 espresso machine for the office break room." He let that sink in. He let me feel the full weight of my own stupidity. I had starved myself to feed people who were feasting on my inheritance. "Why are you showing me this now?" I asked. "Because you are close," he said. He pulled out a calendar. It was marked with red X's. Clause 14.3 requires a lineal descendant to demonstrate independent, self-sustaining income for a continuous period of no less than 6 months, he recited. He pointed to the current date. "You have been at the laundromat for 5 months and 1 week. You have supported yourself without taking a dime of charity, state aid, or family money, mostly because they refuse to give you any. You are exactly 3 weeks and 5 days away from the 6-month mark." He looked me dead in the eye. "In 4 weeks, the clause activates. It creates a legal trigger. If you are rejected from a shelter one more time after that date, while maintaining your income, the voting rights transfer." He slid a piece of paper across the table. It looked like a contract, but there were no lawyers present, just bullet points written in his sharp hand. "I am making you an offer, Hannah," he said, "but the conditions are brutal." I read the paper. Condition 1. You cannot accept a single penny of assistance from anyone in the family or the foundation for the next 4 weeks. Condition 2. You cannot quit your job at the laundromat. You cannot switch to a company owned by the trust. The income must remain completely independent. Condition 3. You cannot miss a shift. You cannot get fired. If your income stream breaks for even 24 hours, the clock resets to 0. You want me to stay in the car? I said, looking up at him. You have the power to put me in a hotel right now, but you want me to sleep in the car for another month? Yes, August said. Why? I demanded. Because if I help you, I taint the evidence, he said. If I give you money, Lydia's lawyers will argue in court that you were not independent. They will say I subsidized you to stage a coup. You have to be clean. Hannah, you have to be undeniable. He leaned back, his eyes narrowing. Here is the plan, he said. Step 1. We document the pattern of abuse and exclusion. We build a wall of evidence so high they cannot climb over it. Step 2. You hit the 6-month mark. Step 3. We trigger the clause and restructure the entire housing system. I looked at the calendar. 4 more weeks of freezing rain. 4 more weeks of washing other people's clothes while wearing the same socks for 3 days in a row. I do not want to destroy the family. I said quietly, I just want a bed. I want to not feel like garbage. I do not want to be the person who burns everything down. August sighed. It was a sound of disappointment. As if I had failed a math problem he expected me to solve easily. You think peace is an option, he said. You think if you just ask nicely enough, they will move over and make room for you on the sofa. He reached into his folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was an email printout. Read this, he said. I took the paper. It was a draft email from Lydia to the board of directors. The subject line was Asset Liquidation Strategy, Harbor Springs. I read the text. Proposal to sell the Harbor Springs facility to private developers. The land value has tripled. We can use the proceeds to finance the new luxury senior living condos in the West District. Current shelter residents can be relocated to the state facility in the next county. I stared at the words. The state facility in the next county was 40 miles away. It was essentially a prison. Lydia was planning to sell the shelter, the only safety net in this part of the city, to build luxury condos. They are closing it, I asked. They are erasing it. August corrected. They do not just want to keep you out, Hannah. They want to remove the door entirely so no one like you can ever knock again. He took the paper back. They think the war is about who gets the nice corner office, he said. They do not understand that the real war is about who holds the power to decide who sleeps inside and who sleeps in the gutter. I felt a cold resolve settle in my stomach. It was heavier than the anger. If I do this, I said, if I stay in the car, if I wait the 4 weeks, what happens then? Then you get the keys, August said, not to a room, to the whole kingdom. Suddenly, a shadow fell over our table. I flinched, instinctively covering the documents with my arm. It was a waiter, a young guy with messy hair and a name tag that read, Kevin. He was holding a pot of coffee, but he wasn't pouring. He was staring at me. Excuse me, he mumbled, looking nervous. You are the girl from last night, right? At the Hope Center. My heart hammered against my ribs. I nodded slowly. I was out back on my smoke break. Kevin said, shifting his weight, I saw you come out. I saw the lady at the desk point you to the street. That was messed up. I walk past there every night, and I can see the empty beds through the window. He poured coffee into my mug, his hand shaking slightly. I just wanted to say, I saw it. It wasn't right. Thank you, I whispered. Kevin nodded and walked away quickly, as if afraid he had said too much. August watched him go, a small, satisfied glint in his eyes. There, he said softly, an independent witness. We didn't even have to look for him. He slid a final document toward me. It was not the timeline or the surveillance log. It was a simple agreement. I am not promising you an inheritance, August said, his voice businesslike. I am not promising you millions of dollars to buy designer bags. This agreement says that if you succeed, you get 3 things: full access to every file in the foundation, absolute transparency on every dollar spent, and the final decision-making power on who enters every shelter bearing the Caldwell name. He uncapped a heavy fountain pen and placed it on the paper. You have a choice, Hannah. You can walk out of here, drive to your mother's house, and beg on your knees. Maybe she will give you the guest room if you promise to be quiet, or you can sign this, sleep in your car for 28 more days, and ensure she never has the power to lock a door against you again. I looked at the pen. I looked at the waiter clearing a table nearby, a witness to my humiliation. I thought about the text from my mother last week, asking for $50 for groceries, while she planned to sell the shelter to build condos. Fairness, August said, watching my face, always looks like revenge to the people who built their fortunes by stepping on you. I picked up the pen. The metal was cold in my hand. I did not sign it because I trusted him. He was a manipulator. He was a man who used his own granddaughter as a pawn in a corporate chess game. But as I looked at the paper, I realized something. For 27 years, my name had been a liability. It had been something to hide, something to apologize for. This was the first time I saw a document where my signature was not just a decoration. It was a weapon. I signed my name, Hannah Sanders. The letters were jagged, sharp, and final. August took the paper back and slipped it into his folder. He did not smile. He did not say congratulations. He just nodded. Once. See you in 4 weeks. Hannah, he said. He stood up, dropped a $20 bill on the table for the coffee, and walked out of the diner without looking back. I sat there in the booth, my hand still gripping the empty space where the pen had been, realizing that for the first time in my life, I was not just waiting for the storm to pass. I was becoming the storm. Jade Monroe did not work in a glass tower. Her office was a converted garage behind a bail bond shop in the industrial district, smelling faintly of toner ink and aggressive coffee. She was not a lawyer. She told me within 30 seconds of my arrival, because lawyers were bound by ethics and billable hours. Jade was a paralegal who specialized in what she called strategic research, which I quickly learned was a polite term for weaponized information gathering. She cleared a massive whiteboard that covered the entire north wall of the room. Empty your pockets. Hannah, she said, put everything on the table. I dumped the contents of the heavy yellow envelope from August onto her metal desk. The bank statements, the trust documents, and the photocopied emails slid across the surface. Jade did not look at them with shock. She looked at them like a butcher sharpening a knife. She began sorting the papers into 3 distinct piles. Her movements were fast and precise. Pile 1, she said, snapping a rubber band around a stack of bank statements. Money allocated for Hannah Sanders' housing. Pile 2, she continued, slamming down a stack of invoices. Money actually spent by Rebecca and Lydia on things that are definitely not Hannah Sanders. She picked up a red marker and turned to the whiteboard. Pile 3 is the most important one, she said. This is the correlation. Hannah, I need you to tell me every single date you were rejected from a shelter in the last 2 years. I need dates you were kicked off a cousin's couch. I need dates where a landlord suddenly canceled a lease you had almost secured. I sat on a folding chair, my mind racing back through the blur of sleepless nights. November 14th, 2 years ago. I said, it was snowing. I tried to get into Harbor Springs. Sharon told me they were full. Jade wrote the date on the board in red ink. October 2nd, last year. I said, I had a deposit ready for a studio on 4th Street. The landlord called me an hour before I was supposed to sign. He said he got a bad reference from a previous community member. Jade wrote that down. Keep going, she said. We spent 2 hours reconstructing the geography of my homelessness. By the time we were done, the board was a sea of red dates. Jade stepped back and picked up the stack of foundation newsletters and press releases August had included in the box. She started taping them next to the red dates. Look at this, she said quietly. I stood up and walked to the board. On November 14th, the night I was turned away into the snow. The foundation held its annual Winter Warmth Gala. The headline on their newsletter read, Our shelter is overflowing with need. Donate tonight to help us expand. On October 2nd, the day my apartment lease was torpedoed, my mother gave an interview to the local paper titled "The Heartbreak of Modern Homelessness: A Mother's Perspective." "It is a pattern," Jade said. "Every time they needed to raise money, they needed a victim. They needed the shelter to be full to create urgency. And they needed you on the street to fuel their own narrative of tragic, unfixable poverty. You were not just a reject. Hannah, you were a prop." I felt sick. They had not just ignored me. They had curated my misery to increase their profit margins. "We need hard data," Jade said. "Paper trails are good, but we need visual proof that they are lying about the numbers." She picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts. "I am calling Eli," she said. Eli Grant lived 3 units down from the storage facility where I sometimes parked my car to sleep. He was a data engineer who had lost his corporate job after a burnout breakdown and now freelanced from a rig he built in his van. I knew him because I had jump-started his battery 3 months ago during a thunderstorm. He arrived 40 minutes later, carrying a laptop covered in stickers and a bag of beef jerky. He did not ask why I was there. He just looked at the whiteboard, then at the bank statements, and whistled low. "So let me get this straight," Eli said, opening his laptop. "They say the beds are full, but you think they are ghosting the inventory?" "I know they are," I said. "I saw them through the glass." Eli cracked his knuckles. "Give me the login for the Foundation's public Instagram and their donor portal." He did not hack them, not technically. He wrote a script that scraped metadata from thousands of photos posted by the Foundation, by staff, and by donors who toured the facility. He pulled timestamps, geotags, and background details. August had also provided a thumb drive containing access to the internal security camera logs, a backdoor he had installed years ago when he still officially ran the building. Eli worked for 3 hours in silence, the only sound the clicking of his mechanical keyboard. Jade and I continued to pin evidence to the wall: green sticky notes for the money stealing, red sticky notes for the rejection events, yellow sticky notes for the lies told in public. It started to look less like a charity flowchart and more like a map of organized crime. "Got it," Eli said suddenly. He spun his laptop around. On the screen was a graph. One line, bright red, showed the official occupancy reported to the city and donors. It hovered consistently at 100%. A second line, bright blue, showed the actual heat signatures derived from the security sensors and camera analysis. The blue line jagged wildly. On most nights, it sat at 60 or 70%. "Look at the delta," Eli said, pointing to the gap between the lines. "On the nights you applied. Hannah, the gap is the widest. Here, on November 14th, they reported 50 beds full. The cameras only show 32 bodies in the sleeping bay. That is 18 empty beds," I whispered. 18 beds, Eli confirmed. "And here's the kicker. This happens consistently on nights where VIP tours are scheduled the next morning. They keep the beds empty so the place smells better and looks tidier for the people writing the checks. 30 to 40% of their capacity is fake," Jade said. Crossing her arms, "They are turning away people to keep the showroom pristine." I pulled out my phone. "I have more," I said. I opened my text history with my mother. I scrolled back to last Christmas. "Read this," I said, handing the phone to Jade. Jade read the text aloud. "Hannah, please do not come to the shelter tonight. We have the mayor coming for a walkthrough, and it would be incredibly awkward for the family if you were seen there. I have put you on a special waiting list. God has a timing for everything. Just stay in your car for one more night. Love, Mom." Jade printed a screenshot of the text. She pinned it to the center of the board and drew a thick black circle around it. "This goes under manipulation and concealment," she said. "She acknowledges you are homeless, acknowledges she has the power to help, and explicitly tells you to stay in a dangerous situation to protect their image." Her phone rang. Jade answered on speaker. It was Mariah, a former volunteer at the Hope Center. I had not seen her in years, but she had heard through the grapevine that I had been turned away again. "Jade, Mariah's voice crackled over the line. I heard you are building a file. We are, Jade said. Are you willing to go on record? I am, Mariah said. I remember the night Hannah came in last year. I was working the intake log. I wrote her name down for bed 12. It was empty. I saw Lydia come in 10 minutes later. She took the logbook, crossed Hannah's name out with a red marker, and wrote image risk in the margin. Then she told me to tell Hannah we were at capacity. Do you have the logbook? Jade asked. No, Mariah said, but I took a picture of the page because I was so angry. I have it on my phone. Send it, Jade said. Now. A minute later, the printer whirred to life. The photo was grainy, but the red ink was unmistakable. My name crossed out. The words, image risk, written in Lydia's distinct, looping handwriting. Jade pinned it to the wall. We are not suing them, Jade said, stepping back to admire the wall. If we sue, they settle. They pay you off, make you sign an NDA, and keep doing this. She tapped the binder containing Clause 14.3. We are taking this to the board, she said. This is an internal governance coup. We prove they violated the trust's core mandate. We prove they violated the founder's direct intent. My phone buzzed. It was a message from August. Check your secure email. The ghosts are talking. I opened the email he had set up for me. Attached were 3 PDF files. They were affidavits, sworn statements from former staff members of the foundation. People who had been fired for asking too many questions about the accounting or for letting too many indigent people into the VIP shelter. August had found them. He had convinced them to speak. I read one of them. I was instructed by Rebecca Mercer to divert funds from the heating repair budget to cover the catering costs for the spring equinox party. When I refused, I was terminated for insubordination. I looked at the wall. The green, red, and yellow notes formed a terrifying picture. For the first time, I did not see my family as powerful giants. I saw them as petty, scrambling thieves who had built a castle out of cardboard and lies. Hannah, Eli said, come look at this. He had been working on a video file. I need 60 to 90 seconds of your attention, he said. He hit play. It was a time-lapse video. It showed the front door of the Hope Center over the course of a single night, the night I was rejected. The footage sped up, showing shadows moving, rain falling. Overlaying the video was a graphic of the bed count available 5. Then, the audio kicked in. It was grainy, clearly recorded from a pocket or a hidden device. It was August's recording. I heard Lydia's voice, sharp and clear. Keep the front row empty. Sharon, if the donors come in, I do not want them seeing the messy locals. We are selling hope, not reality. Tell the Sanders girl to leave. She ruins the aesthetic. The video ended with a freeze frame of me walking away into the rain, with the text, Beds Empty 5, glowing on the screen. The room was silent. The only sound was the hum of the server in the corner. Jade walked over to me. She placed a hand on my shoulder. Her grip was firm. They think you are weak because you cry, she said. They think you are unstable because you sleep in a sedan. They think you will never find your way here because you are too busy trying to survive. She gestured to the wall of evidence, to the undeniable proof of their cruelty. They forgot one thing, Jade said. People who sleep in cars learn how to count every single penny. They learn how to watch everything. And now, Hannah, you are counting every single one of their mistakes. I looked at the wall. I looked at the timeline of my pain turned into their profit. Print it all. I said, make 3 copies. We are going to be ready. The silence broke on a Tuesday morning, not with a bang, but with a notification ping on my phone that felt like a grenade going off in my pocket. We knew they would find out eventually. You cannot scrape metadata from thousands of photos and access internal security logs without leaving a digital footprint. No matter how good Eli was, Aunt Lydia had an IT guy on retainer, a suspicious little man who probably noticed the unauthorized login on the server, but I expected them to call the police. I expected a cease and desist letter. I did not expect a prayer circle. My mother, Rebecca, struck first. She did not call me. She did not come to the laundromat. Instead, she went to the one place where she could control the narrative without interruption. She went to Facebook. I sat in Jade's office, Staring at the screen Eli had pulled up, the post was only 20 minutes old, but it already had 82 likes and 14 shares. The photo attached to the post was a masterpiece of staged vulnerability. It showed my mother kneeling in her garden, her hands clasped together, her head bowed in what looked like agonizing prayer. The lighting was perfect, likely filtered to soften the edges and make her look like a martyr in designer linen. The caption read, "Friends, I am asking for your hearts today. Please pray for my daughter, Hannah. She has lost her way. There is a dark influence in her life right now, a spirit of division that is convincing her to attack the very family that has loved and sheltered her since birth. We are fighting not against flesh and blood, but against the anger that has blinded her. We only want her home. Prodigal daughter family, first Mercer strong." I felt my stomach turn over. It was a physical blow. "Read the comments," Eli said, his voice flat. I leaned in. "Oh, Rebecca, you are a saint to deal with this. Kids today just want handouts. Stay strong. Sister, the devil attacks the most righteous families the hardest. Is this the niece who wouldn't come to Thanksgiving ungrateful?" They were rewriting history in real time. To these people, I was not the girl sleeping in a sedan in the freezing rain. I was the rebellious child throwing a tantrum. I was the villain. "Screenshot everything," Jade ordered. She was already printing the page. She walked over to the evidence wall. She took a roll of black tape and created a new section titled Public Smear Campaign. She pinned the printout of my mother's prayer right in the center. "This is step 1, Jade said, her eyes scanning the hateful comments. "They are inoculating the public. If you try to speak out later, everyone will already believe you are crazy or malicious. They are destroying your credibility before you even open your mouth." My phone pinged again. This time, it was an email. It was from Lydia. The subject line was simply, "Let's fix this." I opened it. The tone was jarringly different from the Facebook post. There was no talk of dark spirits or devils here. It was business, wrapped in the velvet of false affection. "My dearest Hannah, we know you are hurting. We know things have been difficult. Your mother and I have been talking, and we realize we may have been too strict with the intake protocols. We want to help you. Attached is a settlement agreement. If you sign this, the foundation will provide you with a monthly stipend of $4,000. We have also secured a lease in your name at the Riverview Apartments Unit 304. It is fully furnished. You can move in tonight. We also want to offer you an honorary role on the Community Advisory Board. No heavy lifting, just appearances at events so you can be part of the family legacy. Please, let us take care of you. Just sign the attached and send it back. $4,000 a month." I stared at the number. $4,000 was life-changing. It was groceries without a calculator. It was new tires. It was a heater that worked. It was dignity. For a split second, my resolve cracked. I imagined walking into a fully furnished apartment tonight. I imagined a hot shower that lasted longer than the 3 minutes I paid for at the truck stop. I imagined sleeping in a bed with clean sheets. "Don't you dare," Jade said. She had been reading over my shoulder. She reached past me and clicked on the attachment. It was a legal document, dense and long. Jade scrolled past the dollar amounts and went straight to the fine print on page 4. "Here is the cost of that bed." "Hannah," she said, pointing to a paragraph, "the undersigned agrees to waive any and all rights, claims, or privileges associated with the Caldwell Urban Renewal Trust, specifically including but not limited to Section 14.3. The undersigned further acknowledges that all past housing decisions made by the Foundation were necessary, reasonable, and conducted with proper cause." "It is a trap," Jade said. She grabbed a red marker and circled the paragraph on the screen. "They are buying your birthright for $4,000 a month. If you sign this, you admit that they were right to kick you out. You admit you were the problem, and you lose the ability to ever trigger the clause again. It is a bed." "Jade," I whispered, "I am so tired of the car seat. It is not a bed," she snapped. "It is a gilded cage. They will pay you for 6 months, maybe a year. Then, once the legal threat is gone, they will cut the stipend. They will evict you, and you will be back in the sedan. But this time, you will have signed away the only weapon you have. I looked at the screen. I looked at the apartment offer. It was beautiful bait. My phone rang. The screen lit up with a picture of my mother. "Answer it," Jade said. "Put it on speaker. We need the audio." I pressed the button. "Hello, Mom, Hannah." My mother's voice came through the speaker. It was tight, high-pitched. "Did you get Lydia's email?" I did. I said, "We are trying to save you." "Hannah," she said, and the sweetness was starting to fray at the edges. "We are offering you everything you wanted. A home, money. Why haven't you signed it?" "Because I read the waiver." "Mom," I said. There was a silence on the other end. Then, the mask slipped. "You are trying to kill me, aren't you?" Rebecca's voice dropped, trembling with rage. "After everything I have done for you, I carried you. I raised you. And now you are digging through old files. You are listening to that senile old man. You want to tear this family apart over a metal cot." I felt the old fear rising in my throat, the conditioned response to apologize, to fix it, to make her happy. But then I looked at the evidence wall. I saw the sticky notes detailing the money she stole from me to pay for her catering. "If you ever wanted me to have a bed—" "Mom," I said, my voice shaking but steady, "you would not have used the money in my name to buy a leather sofa for your living room." The line went dead silent. She knew. She knew I had the bank records. "You ungrateful little brat," she hissed. "You are dead to us." She hung up. I stood there, staring at the phone. I did not cry. I waited for the tears, but they did not come. Instead, I felt lighter. The worst thing she could do was reject me, and she had already done that 1,000 times. The attacks did not stop there. They coordinated. Over the next 3 hours, my phone became a war zone. It started with Aunt Lydia sending a PDF file. It was titled, "A Letter to a Prodigal Daughter." It was a collection of Bible verses about honoring your father and mother, about the sin of greed, and about how rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. Jade printed it out. "This goes under religious manipulation," she said, pinning it next to the prayer photo. Then came the cousins, people I had not spoken to in 5 years, people who had ignored me at funerals. "Hannah, stop this madness. You are embarrassing the family. Grandpa August is sick in the head. Do not take advantage of him. We are praying for your soul. But you need to drop this lawsuit." Every text message was a bullet, but Jade was a shield. She took every single one, screenshot it, and logged it. "This is harassment," she said. "It is coordinated. It proves they are terrified. They are trying to swarm you." But the real blow came at 4 in the afternoon. I was at the laundromat, starting my shift early because Toby, the owner, had asked to see me. Toby was a nervous man, a guy who just wanted to pay his bills and avoid trouble. He knew I slept in my car, and he let me park in the back lot as long as I kept the place clean. When I walked into his small office, he wouldn't look at me. He was shuffling papers on his desk, his hands sweating. "Hannah," he said, his voice jumping, "listen, you are a great worker. Really, the floors have never been cleaner." But I got a call today, Toby said, from a law firm, representing the Mercer Foundation. My heart stopped. They said I should be careful." Toby continued, wiping his forehead. "They said you have a history of mental instability. They said you might be a danger to the customers. They said if anything happens here, a fire, a theft, an argument, and I knew about your condition, I could be liable." He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "I cannot afford a lawsuit. Hannah, I run a coin laundry. I barely break even. They hinted that they could send health inspectors. They hinted at a lot of things." He took a breath. "I think I have to let you go. Today, panic, cold and sharp, pierced through me. This was the kill shot. Clause 14.3 required 6 months of continuous employment. If I lost this job today, the clock would reset. I would have to start over. I would have to sleep in my car for another 6 months. I would lose." "Toby," I said, my voice rising, "I am not unstable. You know me. I have never missed a shift. I know, Toby said miserably. But they are powerful people. Hannah, they have money. I cannot fight them. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, but I dialed the number. Wait, I said, do not fire me yet. Just listen to this. I put the phone on the table and hit speaker. Jade answered on the first ring. Jade, I said, I am with Toby. The foundation called him. They told him I am mentally unstable and that he would be liable if he kept me. He wants to fire me. There was a pause. Then Jade's voice filled the small office. It was not the voice of a friend. It was the voice of a shark. Hello? Toby? Jade said. My name is Jade Monroe. I am the paralegal representing Hannah Sanders in an ongoing whistleblowing investigation regarding financial fraud at the Mercer Caldwell Foundation. Toby blinked. Whistleblowing, yes. Jade continued, her tone icy and professional. The call you received today was an act of witness intimidation and retaliation. If you fire Hannah Sanders based on hearsay and false medical claims provided by the very people she is investigating, you are not avoiding a lawsuit. Toby, you are walking directly into one. Toby paled. What? We will sue you for wrongful termination, Jade said. We will sue you for discrimination. And we will subpoena your phone records to prove you conspired with a corrupt organization to silence a witness. The Mercer family might have money, Toby, but they are not going to pay your legal fees when you are dragged into federal court for aiding and abetting harassment. Silence hung heavy in the room. The hum of the dryers outside seemed very loud. On the other hand, Jade said, her voice softening just a fraction, if you ignore their illegal threats and let Hannah work her shift, you become a neutral party. You are just a business owner following labor laws. We protect our witnesses. Toby, do you want to be a witness for the truth or a defendant for a lie? Toby looked at the phone. He looked at me. He looked at the fear of the Mercer family. And then he looked at the immediate, terrifying competence of the woman on the speakerphone. He exhaled a long, shaky breath. I did not sign anything with them, he muttered. It was just a phone call. Exactly, Jade said. It was just noise. Toby slumped back in his chair. He waved a hand at me, a gesture of defeat and dismissal. Go to work, Hannah, he said. Just go fold the towels. I did not hear anything. No one called me. Thank you. Toby, I said. I grabbed my phone and walked out of the office before he could change his mind. My legs felt like jelly. I leaned against a row of washing machines, the metal vibrating against my back. They were not just trying to shame me anymore. They were hunting me. They were willing to starve me, smear me, and destroy my sanity just to keep me away from that shelter door. I looked at my reflection in the glass of the washing machine. I looked tired. I looked worn, but I was still standing. Jade's voice was still on the line, tinny and small. Hannah, are you there? I am here, I said. Put this in the file. Jade, I said, watching the suds spin in the machine next to me. Put it all in. The Facebook post, the waiver, the Bible verses, the threat to Toby. We are going to need a bigger wall, Jade said. I hung up and started folding. They wanted me to break. They wanted me to believe I was crazy. But crazy people did not keep receipts. And I was keeping every single one. The invitation had arrived by courier, printed on heavy cream cardstock that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. It was a summons disguised as an olive branch, inviting me to a family lunch at the Crestview Grill to discuss a path forward. The Crestview was the kind of place where the menu did not list prices, and the air was always set to a crisp 68 degrees to keep the patrons in their wool suits from sweating. It was the throne room where the Caldwell family had held court with donors and city council members for 3 decades. I arrived exactly at 12 o'clock. I was not wearing the Suds Spin polo shirt today. I was wearing a navy blazer I had found at a thrift store for $8 and a clean white button-down that I had ironed 3 times until the fabric felt stiff against my skin. I did not carry the thick yellow envelope from August. That was too bulky, too obvious. Instead, I carried a slim black portfolio tucked under my arm. I was not here to negotiate a peace treaty. I was here to collect the final piece of a puzzle that would hang them. The hostess looked at my shoes sensible, scuffed flats, and then at my face. Her smile did not reach her eyes. "The Mercer party is in the private alcove," she said. "They are expecting you." I walked through the dining room, the sound of silver scraping against fine china and the low hum of expensive conversation filled the air. I kept my head high. 5 months ago, I would have felt small here. I would have felt like the poor relation hoping for a doggy bag. Today, I walked like an auditor coming to close the books. I spotted the table in the corner. It was a round table made of dark, polished mahogany, set near the window with a view of the city skyline. My mother, Rebecca, and Aunt Lydia were already seated. I stopped 5 feet from the table. The table was set for 2. There were 2 crystal water goblets, 2 sets of heavy silver cutlery, 2 white linen napkins folded into the shape of swans. There was no third setting. There was no third chair. Lydia looked up, sipping her iced tea. She did not move to make room. She just watched me, her eyes flicking over my thrift store blazer with a microscopic sneer. "You are on time," Lydia said. "That is a surprise." I looked at the empty space where a third chair should have been. "Hello, Lydia." "Hello, Mother," I said. My mother looked pained. She was wearing a silk scarf that I recognized from a magazine spread. She gestured vaguely to the space between them. "We just wanted a private chat." "Hannah," she said. I turned to a passing waiter, a young man balancing a tray of appetizers. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice polite but firm. "Could we get another chair, please? And a setting." The waiter froze. He looked at the table, then looked toward the maitre d' station with a flash of panic in his eyes. I will have to check with the manager, ma'am," he stammered. He hurried away. I stood there, looming over my seated family. They continued to sip their drinks as if I were a coat rack that had been placed inconveniently close to their meal. A moment later, the floor manager arrived. I recognized him immediately. It was David, a guy I had sat next to in 11th grade biology. He looked older, his hairline receding, but he had the same nervous energy he had when we dissected frogs, Hannah David said, clutching a reservation slip. "I did not know this was your party." "Hi, David," I said. "I just need a chair." David looked at the slip in his hand. He looked at Lydia, who was staring out the window, feigning deafness. Then he looked back at me, his face reddening. "Hannah, I can't," he whispered. "What do you mean you can't?" I asked. "It is a restaurant. You have chairs." David took a step closer to me, turning his back to the table so my family could not see what he was doing. He held up the printed reservation ticket. "Read the note," he whispered. I looked at the thermal paper. Under the booking name, Mercer Foundation, there was a typed instruction in the special requests field. "Table for 2. Third party will arrive but will not be dining. Do not add extra chair. Do not change setup." I felt a cold smile touch my lips. It was perfect. It was petty, cruel, and undeniably documented. "David," I said softly, "I know you do not make the rules, but I need you to do me a favor. Let me take a picture of that ticket." David hesitated. He looked at Lydia's rigid back. He remembered me from high school, remembered that I was the girl who shared her notes with him when he was failing. "Quickly," he said. I pulled out my phone and snapped a clear, high-resolution photo of the ticket, capturing the date, the time, and the brutal instruction to keep me standing. "Hey," Lydia barked, turning around. "What are you doing?" I slipped my phone back into my pocket and looked at David. "Thank you, David." He nodded and retreated quickly, leaving me standing alone next to the table where my mother and aunt sat in comfort. I did not drag a chair over from another table. I did not beg to sit. I stood tall, looking down at them, forcing them to crane their necks to look at me. Rebecca cleared her throat. A wave of expensive floral perfume wafted up from her. She reached out a hand, but stopped short of touching my arm. "Hannah, please," she said, her voice trembling with that practiced theatrical emotion. "Why are you being so difficult? We are trying to help you." "Help me," I asked, "by making me stand while you eat." It is symbolic, Lydia said, cutting her steak. It is a reminder of your station until you decide to rejoin the family properly. Rebecca ignored her sister and opened her purse. She pulled out a checkbook. What do you want? Hannah, she asked, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Do you want a private room? Do you want a monthly allowance? We can go higher than $4,000. Do you want a seat on the junior board? Just tell me what the number is. I will sign it right now. Just tear up those papers you have been showing people. I reached into my slim portfolio. I did not pull out a contract. I pulled out a single photograph printed on glossy paper. It was a still frame from the video Eli had processed. It showed the interior of the Hope Center at 2 a.m, rows of empty beds with white sheets, glowing ghostly in the dark. I placed the photo on the table, right on top of Lydia's bread plate. Lydia recoiled, as if I had placed a dead rat on her china. Under the photo, I placed a copy of the report Lydia had submitted to the city council that same week. The header read, "Full occupancy, no vacancy. Explain this," I said. Lydia scoffed and pushed the photo away with the tip of her knife. You are so naive. Hannah, she said, shaking her head, you do not understand how to run an organization. Those beds are not empty. They are strategic reserves. Strategic reserves, I repeated. We have donors coming through. Lydia hissed, her voice low and venomous. We have image standards to maintain. We cannot have someone, like you, sleeping in the front row when the mayor walks through. We cannot have people who look desperate and unstable mixing with the people who write the checks. The beds stay empty so the image stays clean. I felt the recorder in my pocket humming against my hip. I needed her to say it one more time. I needed it to be crystal clear. So you admit, I said, keeping my voice steady, that you deny shelter to eligible people, specifically me, not because of space, but because of image. Lydia rolled her eyes. She took a sip of her wine. Grow up. Hannah, we are not running a flophouse. We are running a foundation. Yes, we keep the wrong element out. That is my job. I reached into my portfolio again, this time. I pulled out a photocopy of the trust governance document. I flipped it to page 47, clause 14.3. I placed it on the table. The red sticky note August had placed there years ago was still visible in the photocopy. Descendant denied shelter at any Caldwell-funded facility. That is the sentence this clause was written to address. I said. Lydia looked at the document. She did not read it. She knew what it was. That old thing is unenforceable, she sneered. Daddy was senile when he wrote it. No judge will uphold a clause that transfers voting rights based on a temper tantrum. She reached into her own bag and pulled out a thick document bound in blue paper. She slid it across the table toward me. This is the friendly settlement, she said. We have updated the terms, $5,000 a month, a condo in the West District, and a seat on the Community Advisory Council. I looked at the cover page. Community Advisory Council non-voting. It is a good offer. Hannah, Rebecca pleaded, you will be safe. You will have a home. You just have to sign the waiver and stop this investigation. I looked at the document. I looked at the empty chair that wasn't there. No voting rights. I said, Of course not. Lydia said, You are not qualified to vote on policy. You sleep in a car. I pushed the blue document back. I did not touch it with my fingers. I used the corner of my portfolio to shove it off the edge of the table. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. There will be no more private negotiations behind closed doors, I said. I took a step back, raising my voice. The ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to dip. A few heads at nearby tables turned. You invited me here to ambush me, I said, loud enough for the couple at the next table to hear. You invited me to a lunch where you refused to give me a seat, to force me to sign a paper that allows you to keep locking the shelter doors against people like me. Hannah, stop it, Rebecca hissed, looking around frantically. You are making a scene. I am not making a scene. Mother, I said, I am making a record. I pointed to the photo of the empty beds. You stole the money meant for my housing. I said, you kept the beds empty to impress rich people, and you left your own daughter in the freezing rain because she didn't match the decor. Rebecca stood up, Her face was flushed with a mix of embarrassment and sudden, vicious anger. The mask of the grieving, prayerful mother fell away completely. "You ungrateful little wretch," she spat. Her voice carried across the room. The restaurant went silent. "We gave you everything," Rebecca shouted, "and you throw it in our faces. You belong outside. People who do not know how to be thankful deserve to be on the street. Those beds are for people who know how to show gratitude, not for entitled brats who think the world owes them a living." I stood completely still. The air in the room was electric. "Thank you," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "Thank you for stating that so clearly for the recording." I pulled my phone out of my pocket and tapped the screen, stopping the recording. I held it up so she could see the waveform file saving. Rebecca's face went pale. She realized what she had just done. She had just admitted, in front of 30 witnesses and a digital recorder, that access to the charitable shelter was conditional on personal gratitude to her, not on need. Lydia slammed her hand on the table. "Get out!" she snarled. "Get out of here before I call security. I am leaving." I said, "I have everything I came for." I turned and walked toward the exit. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my steps were steady. Near the hostess stand, David, the manager, was pretending to check the reservation book. He looked pale. "David," I said, stopping in front of him. He looked up. He looked at the furious women at the table in the corner, and then he looked at me. "Did they demand that setup?" I asked. "Did they explicitly tell you to deny me a seat?" David swallowed hard. He looked around the room. He saw the way the other diners were whispering. He saw the cruelty of it. "Yes," he said quietly. "They did. Will you sign a statement confirming that I asked?" David hesitated for only a second. Then he nodded. "Send it to me," he said. "I will sign it. That wasn't right." "Hannah, thank you," I said. I walked out of the Crestview Grill and into the bright, blinding afternoon sun. The air smelled of exhaust and asphalt, cleaner than the air inside that restaurant. I walked to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and locked the doors. My hands were shaking. But this time, it wasn't from cold or fear. It was the adrenaline of the kill. I opened the chat app on my phone. I attached the photo of the receipt with the "do not add extra chair" instruction. I attached the audio file of Rebecca screaming that I belonged on the street. I attached the contact info for David. I typed a message to Jade. "The pattern is complete. The final rejection was not at the shelter lobby. It was at the table where they feed the donors. They put it in writing." I hit send. 3 dots appeared on the screen immediately. Jade was typing. "Received." She wrote back. "That audio is the nail in the coffin. That proves malice. That proves they are using the trust as a personal weapon." A second message popped up. "The timeline is locked. Now we just wait for the clock to run out on your income streak. Go to work. Hannah, keep your head down. The next time you see them, it won't be at a lunch table. It will be at the board meeting. And I promise you, that meeting will not look like any meal they have ever hosted." I put the phone down. I looked at the Crestview Grill through my rearview mirror. I started the engine of my old sedan. I had 28 days left to sleep in this car, 28 days of folding other people's laundry. But for the first time, the car didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a waiting room for the executioner. The last night of the 6th month smelled like lavender detergent and ozone. I was standing in the fluorescent hum of the laundromat, watching the final minutes tick down on the large digital clock above the dryers. For 26 weeks, I had not missed a single shift. I had folded thousands of strangers' underwear. I had scrubbed vomit off the linoleum floors at 3 in the morning, and I had slept in my car every single day, refusing to spend a dime on a motel room just in case it looked like financial weakness. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from my banking app. "Lydia Mercer has sent you $500 with Zelle." It was the 5th time she had tried this week. It was a trap. If I accepted the money, even by accident, the streak of independent income would be broken. Their lawyers would argue that I was subsidized by family funds. I tapped the screen, hit reject, and sent the money back into the void. "Nice try." "Lydia," I whispered, Toby came out of the back office. He looked tired, but he was smiling. He held a crisp sheet of paper in his hand. It was stamped with the raised seal of a notary public. "Here you go, kid," Toby said, handing it to me. I took the paper. It was my payroll history. 6 months of continuous, uninterrupted employment. Every hour accounted for. Every tax dollar deducted. It was proof that I existed outside of the Caldwell shadow. I notarized it myself down at the bank this morning. Toby said, "It is bulletproof. You are officially the most consistent employee I have ever had." "Thank you, Toby," I said. "You have no idea what this piece of paper is worth. It is worth minimum wage." Toby joked, "But looking at your face, I guess it buys something a lot more expensive." I walked out of the laundromat into the dawn. I did not go to my car to sleep. I drove straight to Jade's office. Jade did not say a word when I handed her the payroll record. She just added it to the top of a thick stack of documents she had bound in a black leather folder. It was a 14-page dossier that weighed about 3 pounds. "It is time," Jade said. We drove to the headquarters of the Caldwell Urban Renewal Trust. I had seen pictures of the building, but I had never been invited inside. It sat on a hill overlooking Summit Falls, a fortress of steel and glass that reflected the sky. It looked like a place where gods made decisions about mortals. We parked the sedan next to a row of Mercedes and BMWs. The security guard at the front desk looked at my pass, then at his computer, and frowned. "You are not on the guest list." "Ms. Sanders," he said, "I am not a guest." I said, my voice steady, "I am a proxy." Before he could argue, the elevator doors pinged open. August stood there. He was leaning heavily on his cane, but his suit was immaculate. "She is with me," August said. The guard stepped back immediately. We rode the elevator to the top floor in silence. When the doors opened, we walked down a long corridor lined with portraits of my ancestors. I saw my great-grandfather. I saw August in his younger years, and at the end of the hall were double mahogany doors. August pushed them open. The boardroom was massive. A table long enough to land a plane on sat in the center, surrounded by 20 leather chairs. At the far end, sitting comfortably with coffees and pastries, were Aunt Lydia and my mother, Rebecca. They were laughing with a man in a gray suit, Mr. Langford, the chairman of the board. When we walked in, the laughter stopped. Rebecca put her coffee cup down. Her face hardened. "Dad," she said, her voice tight, "this is a closed session. What is she doing here?" August ignored her. He walked to the head of the table, the seat that had been empty for 10 years. He did not sit down. He pulled the heavy leather chair out and turned it to face me. "Sit, Hannah," he said. The room went deadly silent. Lydia stood up. "This is ridiculous," she said. "That is the founder's chair. She cannot sit there. She is not even a board member. She is a liability we are trying to manage." August looked at his daughter with eyes like glaciers. "Today," he said, his voice filling the room, "the only person qualified to use my voting rights regarding the shelter operations is Hannah Sanders." He nodded to me. I sat down. The leather was cool and soft. I placed the black dossier on the table. The company lawyer, a nervous man named Mr. Sterling, cleared his throat. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, shuffling his papers. "We have a strict agenda today. We need to approve the sale of the Harbor Springs facility. We cannot just introduce unauthorized guests. Read the governance bylaws." August commanded. Page 47, Article 14.3. Mr. Sterling looked at the book in front of him. He hesitated. "Read it?" August barked. "Mr. Sterling adjusted his glasses and read, "In the event that a direct lineal descendant of the founder is denied shelter at any facility fully or partially funded by the trust, and said descendant can demonstrate a period of independent, self-sustaining income for a continuous period of no less than 6 months. The voting rights associated with the founder's shares regarding all housing and shelter operations shall temporarily transfer to said descendant." Rebecca let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "You have got to be kidding me," she said. She looked around the table at the other board members, smiling as if this were a joke. Independent income, Rebecca asked, pointing a finger at me. She folds underwear at a laundromat for $11 an hour. She sleeps in a car. That is not income. Dad, when you wrote that clause, you meant a real job. You meant a career. You meant success. You did not mean pocket change from a coin laundry. Jade stepped forward from the wall where she had been standing. She placed the notarized payroll document in front of the chairman. Mr. Langford, Mr. Chairman, Jade said, the clause does not specify the amount of income. It specifies independence. This document certifies that for 6 months, Hannah Sanders has supported herself entirely on wages earned from an entity with no connection to the Caldwell Trust. Jade slid a second sheet of paper across the table, and this analysis shows that while she was earning $11 an hour, the foundation was misappropriating $2,500 a month of her trust allocation to pay for country club fees and catering. Mr. Langford picked up the payroll document. He looked at it closely. Then he looked at Rebecca. It appears to meet the legal definition of independent income. Rebecca, he said calmly. But she was not denied shelter, Lydia shouted. Losing her cool. We have protocols. She was a risk to the environment. We have to maintain standards. Eli walked to the front of the room. He plugged his laptop into the projector system. Let's talk about those standards, Eli said. The screen descended from the ceiling. The lights dimmed. Eli played the video. It was the time-lapse. The board members watched as the shadows moved across the front of the Hope Center. They saw the timestamp November 14th, 2 a.m. They saw the graphic overlay available beds 5. Then, Eli played the audio. Lydia's voice boomed through the high-quality speakers of the boardroom. We cannot let that crowd sleep here. Keep a few beds open for the donors if they want to tour. I do not want them seeing the messy locals. I watched the faces of the board members. One woman, a donor representative, looked down at her hands. Another man shifted uncomfortably in his suit. That voice recording was taken 3 days before the denial. Eli said. Then Jade read the affidavit from Mariah. I witnessed Hannah Sanders being asked to leave the building into freezing rain. I checked the logbook personally. It showed 5 vacancies. I was instructed by Director Mercer to mark Hannah as an image risk. Finally, Jade projected the system log on the screen. It was the smoking gun. Applicant Hannah Sanders. Status denied. Reason image risk/emotional instability. The room was silent. The air conditioner hummed, sounding like a jet engine in the quiet. August walked over to Mr. Langford. He placed a single sheet of paper on the table. This is my formal letter of activation, August said, effective immediately. I am transferring my voting proxy on all housing matters to Hannah Sanders. Mr. Langford looked at the letter. He looked at the video frozen on the screen. He looked at Lydia, whose face was a mask of fury and fear. He took a deep breath and adjusted his tie. The evidence is conclusive, Langford said. The conditions of Article 14.3 have been met. He turned his chair to face me. For the first time, he did not look at me like a charity case. He looked at me like a peer. Ms. Sanders, he said, as the acting proxy for the founder, with full voting rights on the Housing Committee. Do you have a motion to present before we proceed with the vote to sell the shelter? I stood up. My legs were shaking, but I placed my hands flat on the mahogany table to steady them. I looked at my mother. I looked at Aunt Lydia. I looked at the people who had spent my life telling me I was too broken to be part of this room. Yes, Mr. Chairman, I said, I have a motion. I opened the black folder. I am not here to sell the shelter. I said, I am here to ensure that no one sitting at this table ever has the power to close its doors again. The room waited. The silence was heavy, expectant. I took a breath, and I prepared to bring the house down. The legal attack arrived 48 hours before the board meeting. It did not come with a warning or a negotiation offer. It came in the form of a process server, a heavy-set man in a windbreaker who found me at the laundromat while I was unjamming a coin slot on dryer number 4. He handed me a thick stack of documents stapled in blue backing paper and said, You have been served. I wiped my hands on my jeans and opened the packet. It was an emergency motion filed in the County Superior Court. The plaintiff was Lydia Mercer Vane. The defendant was the Caldwell Urban Renewal Trust and August Caldwell. I was listed as an interested party. Lydia was asking for an immediate temporary restraining order to block the activation of Clause 14.3. Her argument was brutal and specific. She claimed the clause was legally ambiguous and reckless, granting executive power over a multi-million-dollar housing system to an individual with no professional qualifications. But the real venom was in the affidavits attached to the motion. In sworn statements, Lydia argued that August Caldwell was suffering from advanced cognitive decline and was susceptible to undue influence and manipulation. She painted a picture of a senile old man being taken advantage of by a predatory granddaughter. Then she turned the gun on me. The motion described me as an individual with a history of chronic instability, homelessness, and erratic behavior. It cited my refusal to accept family assistance as proof of a persecution complex. It argued that allowing a person who slept in a vehicle to manage housing policy was an immediate danger to the vulnerable population of the shelter system. They were trying to have August declared incompetent and me declared insane. While I was reading the legal paperwork, my phone buzzed. It was Jade. "Check Facebook," she said. "Your mother is going nuclear." I opened the app. Rebecca had posted a new photo. It showed August lying on a gurney, being loaded into the back of an ambulance. His eyes were closed, his face pale. The caption read, "My heart is breaking. Please pray for my father." August. His mind is failing him, and now he is being dragged into a legal battle he does not understand by people who only want his money. We are fighting to protect his legacy and his health. Dementia awareness. Save Dad. I stared at the photo. I recognized the coat he was wearing. "That picture is from 4 years ago," I told Jade. "That was when he slipped on the ice outside the library and broke his ankle. He was not confused. He was just in pain." "It does not matter," Jade said. She cropped the date. "To the public, it looks like he is dying right now." The comments were flooding in. Hundreds of people sending prayer hands and angry emojis, calling me a vulture, calling the family heroes for protecting their sick patriarch. "They are trying to win the court of public opinion before we even get to the judge," Jade said. "They want the judge to think August is a vegetable." "What do?" I asked. "We do nothing," Jade said. "August is handling it." 2 hours later, August Caldwell walked onto the stage at the State Housing Summit in downtown Summit Falls. He did not use his cane. He walked with a slow, deliberate power that silenced the room. He was wearing a crisp navy suit, and there was not a single tremor in his hands as he adjusted the microphone. The local news was broadcasting it live. I watched on my phone from the back of the laundromat. "There are rumors," August said, his voice deep and resonant, "that I am too old to understand the direction of my own company. There are rumors that I'm being manipulated." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "I built this city's skyline," he said, "and I am healthy enough to know exactly what is happening in the buildings I own. I am healthy enough to know that a shelter built on the practice of rejecting family members is not a shelter. It is a mask." He leaned forward. "My granddaughter is not manipulating me," he said. "She is the only one who has reminded me of what my name is supposed to stand for. If clarity looks like madness to my board of directors, then perhaps they are the ones who have lost their minds." The speech lasted 15 minutes. He spoke about interest rates, zoning laws, and the moral obligation of wealth. He was sharp, funny, and commanded the room. By the time he walked off stage, the narrative of the senile old man had evaporated. The next morning, we were in court. The hearing was for the emergency injunction. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and anxiety. Lydia and Rebecca sat on the left, flanked by 3 lawyers in expensive suits. I sat on the right with August and Jade. The judge, a stern woman named Justice Vance, looked over her glasses at Lydia's legal team. "I read your motion," Justice Vance said. "You claim Mr. Caldwell is cognitively impaired and unable to execute his own bylaws. Yes, Your Honor, Lydia's lawyer said. He is being led astray by his granddaughter. He is not of sound mind. Justice Vance picked up a newspaper from her bench. On the front page was a picture of August from the night before, standing strong at the podium. I watched the news last night, Counselor, the judge said. Mr. Caldwell gave a detailed analysis of municipal bond rates for 20 minutes. He seemed more cogent than half the lawyers who come into this courtroom. Are you asking me to ignore the evidence of my own eyes? It is a facade, Your Honor, the lawyer insisted. He has good days and bad days. We believe the granddaughter is coaching him. Your Honor, Jade said, standing up, we would like to submit Exhibit D. She handed a folder to the bailiff. These are internal emails retrieved from the Foundation server, Jade said. Dated 3 days ago, from Lydia Mercer Vane to Rebecca Mercer. The judge opened the folder. She read the email silently. Her eyebrows shot up. Read it for the record, the judge ordered. Jade picked up her copy. Subject: the optics problem. Body. If we can get Dad to fall in public, or if we can stage a medical episode before the meeting, we can call an ambulance. If he is hospitalized, the bylaws freeze all voting changes. We need a doctor who will sign a temporary incapacity order. I know a guy at City General who owes us a favor. The courtroom went silent. Lydia turned pale. Rebecca put her hand over her mouth. You were plotting to stage a fall, Judge Vance asked, her voice low and dangerous. You were conspiring to manufacture a medical emergency to retain corporate control. That was just a theoretical discussion, the lawyer stammered. This court is not a tool for your family power plays, Judge Vance snapped. And it is certainly not a place to defraud the public about a man's health. The motion to void Clause 14.3 is denied, and it is denied with prejudice. If you bring this claim before me again without new, substantial evidence, I will hold you in contempt. She slammed the gavel. Get out of my courtroom! We had won the legal battle, but they were not done. They shifted tactics from the grandfather to the granddaughter. That afternoon, I was back at the laundromat. The high of the court victory was fading into the reality of my shift. I was folding towels when the automatic doors opened. 2 women walked in. They wore windbreakers with the county seal and carried clipboards. They did not look like customers. Hannah Sanders, one of them asked. Yes, I said, gripping the counter. I am Brenda, and this is Sarah. We are from Adult Protective Services, she said. We received a call regarding your welfare. I felt the blood drain from my face. Customers were watching. Toby was watching from his office. A call? I asked. We received a report that you are living in a vehicle, that you are experiencing paranoid delusions, and that you may be a danger to yourself or others. The woman said. Her voice was kind, but it was the kindness of a person talking to a crazy person. The report states, you believe your family is conspiring against you. Sharon, it had to be Sharon, the receptionist at the shelter, acting on Lydia's orders. I am not delusional, I said, keeping my voice steady. I do sleep in my car. That is true. But I am employed, I am sober, and I am not a danger to anyone. The report says you have been harassing a local charity, Sarah said. We need to do a psychological evaluation. Hannah, if we feel you are at risk, we can place you on a 72-hour hold for observation. A 72-hour hold. That would mean missing 3 days of work. That would break my income streak. It would reset the clock on Clause 14.3 just days before I crossed the finish line. They were trying to lock me up. I took a deep breath. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out the business card Jade had given me for exactly this moment. I am not going to answer any medical questions, I said clearly, but I will tell you this. The people who called you are currently the subject of a fraud investigation. I am a whistleblower, and this visit, I gestured to the clipboards. This is retaliation. I handed them the card. Call my legal representative. She has the case file number. If you detain me based on a false report filed by the targets of my investigation, You will be violating federal whistleblower protection laws." The social workers exchanged a look. The word whistleblower changed the temperature in the room. It moved the conversation from mental health crisis to legal liability. We are just following up on a tip," Brenda said, stepping back. "And now you have the context for that tip," I said. "Please leave my workplace." They left. They walked out faster than they had walked in. 10 minutes later, Jade was on the phone with the head of the Department of Social Services. She was not polite. She sent a formal cease and desist letter to the city, attaching a dossier of the harassment I had faced. She labeled it Exhibit E Pattern of Retaliation and Intimidation. "We are adding this to the board presentation," Jade told me. "They messed up. Hannah, they tried to use the system to crush you, but they just handed us the final weapon. Now we can prove that they are not just thieves, they are tyrants." By the time the sun went down, Mr. Langford, the chairman of the board, had received a copy of Exhibit E. Jade told me later that he read it in his office, alone. He read the text messages, the email about the staged fall, and the report from the social workers. He realized then that this was not just a squabble between a rebellious granddaughter and her strict aunt. He realized he was sitting on top of a volcano. If this went public, if the press found out the foundation was weaponizing social services to silence a whistleblower, the Caldwell name would be mud. The donors would flee. The trust would collapse. The only way to save the ship was to throw the captain overboard. That night, I drove my car to the bluff overlooking the river. I parked in my usual spot, the one hidden by the overgrown oak trees. I reclined the seat and pulled my blanket up to my chin. It was the same car. It was the same parking spot. It was the same cold air seeping through the window seals. But I did not feel the same. For 6 months, I had been a ghost. I had been something people looked through or looked away from. I had been the girl who didn't exist. Tonight, I existed. I was the most dangerous person in the city because I was the only one telling the truth. My phone buzzed on the dashboard. It was a text from August. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow. They will learn a lesson they should have known already. A chair is not just a piece of furniture to sit on. A chair is the authority to say who comes in and who stays out." I closed my eyes. I did not dream of a warm bed. I dreamed of the boardroom door opening and the look on Lydia's face when she realized the lock was on the other side. The boardroom was situated on the top floor of the Caldwell building, a glass box that usually offered a panoramic view of the city skyline and the river winding through the industrial district. But today, the heavy velvet curtains were drawn tight. The room was sealed off from the sun. The air conditioning was set to a chill that made the skin on my arms prickle, but I knew the temperature had nothing to do with the thermostat. It was the atmosphere of a tribunal. We sat at the long mahogany table. On one side sat the board of directors, 12 men and women in suits who controlled millions of dollars in charitable assets. At the head of the table sat Mr. Langford, the chairman. To his right sat August, silent and watchful as a hawk. To his left, huddled together like cornered animals, were my mother, Rebecca, and my Aunt Lydia. I sat opposite them. I had Jade on one side and Eli on the other. We were the prosecution. Langford did not waste time with pleasantries. He did not offer coffee. He opened a leather binder in front of him, the sound of the heavy cover hitting the table echoing in the silence. "We have 2 distinct issues to address this afternoon," Langford said, his voice grave. "First, we have allegations of gross financial misappropriation and the misuse of shelter assets. Second, we have the formal activation of Clause 14.3 of the Trust Governance." He looked over his reading glasses at Lydia. "The founder's proxy has been triggered," Langford continued. "That is a matter of law, not debate. What we are here to decide is the future of the leadership of this foundation." Rebecca leaned forward. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her makeup carefully applied to suggest a woman under siege. She tried to catch the eye of a board member she had known for 20 years, but he looked down at his notepad. "Please," Rebecca said, her voice trembling with that weaponized fragility I knew so well. "Can we not call it a crisis? This is a family matter. Hannah is upset. She has been influenced by people who do not understand our history. She is acting out of personal hurt. We should not turn a family disagreement into an organizational collapse. Lydia jumped in, her voice sharper, more aggressive. This is a hostile takeover disguised as a compliance issue. Lydia snapped. The girl has been homeless. She is unstable. She is letting these consultants feed her paranoia. We are talking about handing over the keys to a multi-million-dollar portfolio to someone who folds sheets for a living. Jade did not look at them. She picked up a remote control and pointed it at the large screen at the end of the room. I would like to present the evidence of this so-called family disagreement, Jade said. The screen flickered to life. Slide 1. Jade said. It was a simple flowchart. On the left was a box labeled Housing Stipend Hannah Sanders. On the right were 2 boxes labeled Rebecca Mercer Personal and Lydia Mercer Vane Discretionary. Between them was a thick red arrow representing money. Over the last 5 years, the trust released $150,000 intended for the housing of the founder's granddaughter. Jade narrated calmly. 0% of that money reached the beneficiary. 100% was absorbed by the directors. Jade clicked the remote. A scanned invoice appeared. It was for the renovation of a kitchen. The address on the invoice was my mother's house. The funds for this $40,000 renovation were drawn directly from the stipend account on the same week Hannah Sanders was evicted from a motel for inability to pay $40 a night. Jade said. Rebecca flinched as if she had been slapped. She opened her mouth to speak, but Jade clicked again. Slide 2. Jade said, the myth of full occupancy. The screen showed a split image. On the left was the official report Lydia had submitted to the board last month, stamped with the words, full capacity. On the right was the still frame from Eli's video, showing the rows of empty beds glowing in the dark. The foundation has consistently reported 100% occupancy to secure municipal grants, Jade said. However, thermal imaging and internal camera logs confirm that actual occupancy averages 60%. Eli spoke up then, tapping his laptop. We analyzed the data. Eli said, the discrepancy is not random. The beds are kept empty during weeks when donor tours are scheduled or when specific undesirable applicants attempt to enter. Jade clicked again. An email appeared on the screen. It was from Lydia to the shelter staff. Keep the front bay clear. We have the Gold Circle donors coming Tuesday. I do not want them seeing the mess. Tell any intakes that we are full. The boardroom was deadly quiet. I saw Ms. Patel, a young board member who represented the tech sector donors, narrow her eyes at the screen. Jade clicked one more time, and finally, Jade said, the pattern of exclusion. The photo of the Crestview Grill receipt appeared on the giant screen. It was zoomed in on the special instruction line. Table for 2. Third party will arrive but will not be dining. Do not add extra chair. Do not change setup. They did not just deny her a bed, Jade said, her voice dropping an octave. They denied her a seat at the table where they were eating lunch paid for by the foundation. This is not policy. This is malice. Eli then pulled up a new graphic. It was a heat map of the city. Bright red dots were scattered across the map. We looked into the real estate portfolio. Eli said, the foundation has purchased 12 residential properties in the last 3 years using the Affordable Housing Expansion Fund. He pointed to the red dots. None of these are being used as shelters. Eli said, 7 are standing empty, appreciating in value. 5 are being rented out at market rates to private tenants. The income from these rentals is not flowing back into the shelter budget. It is flowing into the administrative bonus pool. The room erupted in murmurs. This was no longer about me. This was about tax fraud. This was about the board member's own liability. Ms. Patel stood up. She smoothed her skirt and looked directly at Lydia. Mrs. Mercer Vane. Ms. Patel said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. I have a question regarding the country club membership. Lydia stiffened. That is a networking expense, she said quickly. I meet donors there. Ms. Patel looked at the documents in front of her. And the kitchen renovation, Ms. Patel asked. Was the granite countertop also for networking? Lydia hesitated. She looked at Rebecca. She looked at Langford. My home is used for fundraising events. Lydia stammered. We host dinners. The kitchen needed to be commercial grade to handle the catering. It was a necessary upgrade for the foundation's hospitality. It was a weak lie, and everyone in the room knew it. Langford cleared his throat. He turned his chair away from Lydia and looked at me. Ms. Sanders, Langford said. I sat up straighter. You are currently the acting proxy for the founder. Langford said. You hold the voting power on this issue. This power is not a weapon for revenge. It is a tool for correction. What is your proposal? I took a deep breath. I looked at the piece of paper Jade had helped me draft. My hands were steady. I proposed 3 immediate actions. Mr. Chairman, I said, I read from the paper. First, I move to immediately suspend the spending authority of Lydia Mercer Vane and Rebecca Mercer. They are to be removed from all bank accounts associated with the shelter and the housing fund. Effective this second, I looked up. Lydia's face was white. Second, I propose the appointment of an independent forensic auditor. They will have 30 days to review every contract, every invoice, and every email sent in the last 5 years. I paused. Third, I propose the implementation of the open door standard. What is that? Langford asked. It is a new policy. I said, no shelter director can report full occupancy unless every single physical bed is filled. If a bed is empty, the door must be open. If an applicant is denied for safety reasons, that denial must be documented, photographed, and countersigned by an independent ombudsman within 24 hours. No more turning people away because they do not look right for the brochure. Rebecca slammed her hand on the table. She burst into tears. You are killing me, she screamed. She looked at me with wild, wet eyes. I raised you, Hannah. I fed you, I clothed you, and this is how you repay me by treating me like a criminal in front of strangers. I looked at her. I did not feel the old guilt. I did not feel the urge to comfort her. You used my name to buy a kitchen. Mother, I said quietly. You are ungrateful, she sobbed. I did the best I could. I slept in a sedan for 6 months. I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. I washed my face in a gas station sink while you picked out granite countertops with money that had my name on it. Rebecca froze. The reality of my words hung in the air. August stood up. He had been silent for the entire meeting, a statue at the head of the table. Now, he leaned on his cane and placed a single document on the mahogany surface. There is one more thing, August said. He slid the document toward Langford. This is a codicil to my will, August said. It is also an amendment to the trust governance that I filed secretly 5 years ago, to be revealed only upon the activation of Clause 14.3. Langford picked it up. He read it silently. His eyes widened. Read it? August said. Langford adjusted his glasses. Any trustee, director, or family member who is found to have knowingly used trust assets to exclude, deny shelter to, or cause the homelessness of a lineal descendant of the founder shall immediately and irrevocably forfeit all administrative roles, board seats, and beneficiary status regarding the housing assets. The room gasped. This is not a vote, August said, looking at his daughters. This is an automatic trigger. He pointed his cane at Lydia, then at Rebecca. You did not just fail a performance review, August said. You activated your own resignation. By denying Hannah a bed, you legally fired yourselves. Lydia stared at the document. She realized then that the trap had not been sprung today. It had been sprung the moment she told Sharon to turn me away 5 months ago. Langford looked around the table. We have a motion on the floor from the proxy, Langford said, and we have a governance mandate from the founder. I suggest we make this official to save what is left of our reputation. He looked at the board members, all in favor of the motion to remove Lydia Mercer Vane and Rebecca Mercer from their positions and to install the interim oversight proposed by Ms. Sanders. Ms. Patel raised her hand immediately. Aye. The man next to her raised his hand. Aye. One by one. The hands went up. They were not doing it because they loved me. They were doing it because they were terrified of being dragged down with the sinking ship. They were saving their own skins. I, I, I. It was unanimous. Rebecca let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. She clamped her hands over her ears as if to block out the sound of her world collapsing. She slumped forward onto the table, weeping into the polished wood. Lydia did not scream. She did not cry. She sat perfectly still. Her face had gone completely slack, void of all emotion. She looked at me across the table. Her eyes were not sad. They were cold. They were the eyes of a reptile that had decided to wait for the next opportunity to strike. But it did not matter what she was planning. Langford banged his gavel. "The motion carries," he said. "Security will escort the former directors to collect their personal effects. Their access cards are to be deactivated immediately." I watched as 2 security guards stepped forward. They stood behind my mother and my aunt. The money was locked. The accounts were frozen. The keys to the shelter and the keys to the empire were sitting on the table in front of me. August looked at me and nodded. It was a small gesture, but it said everything. I looked at the closed curtains. "Open them," I said to the nearest guard. He looked surprised, but he walked over and pulled the cord. The heavy velvet parted. Bright, harsh sunlight flooded the room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, washing out the artificial gloom. Below us, the city of Summit Falls stretched out, full of people who needed homes. I took a deep breath. The air in the room finally felt breathable. The security guards escorted my mother and Aunt Lydia out of the room, their heels clicking sharply against the floor in a rhythm of defeat. The heavy mahogany doors closed behind them with a finality that vibrated through the table. For a moment, the silence in the boardroom was absolute. It was just us, me, Jade, Eli, and August sitting in the wreckage of a dynasty that had taken decades to build and less than an hour to dismantle. Mr. Langford, looking 5 years older than he had at the start of the meeting, walked over to the window. He pulled the cord on the heavy velvet drapes. The fabric swooshed back, and for the first time all afternoon, the late-day sun flooded the room. It hit the dust motes dancing in the air, turning them into gold. Below us, the city of Summit Falls sprawled out, a patchwork of gray roofs and winding streets. From this height, you could not see the potholes. You could not see the rusted cars parked in the shadows of industrial buildings. But I knew they were there. We did not open a bottle of champagne. We did not high-five. There was too much work to do. "This is not a victory lap," I said, looking at the group. "This is a construction site." I pulled a fresh notepad toward me. "We need to codify the open-door standard," I said. "I want it renamed. Let's call it the no-closed-door policy." I wrote it down, my pen scratching loudly on the paper. "If there is at least one empty bed in any facility we fund, no staff member is permitted to refuse entry to a person seeking shelter based on appearance, image, or so-called stability risks." I said, "If a bed is empty, it gets filled, period." "And if there is a genuine safety risk," Jade asked, playing devil's advocate, "if someone is violent, then the refusal must be documented." I replied, "It requires 2 signatures, one from the intake staff and one from an independent external monitor. No more secret rejections, no more quiet erasures." Jade nodded, already typing on her laptop. "I am drafting the whistleblower and anti-retaliation policy for the entire system." Jade said, "From now on, every volunteer and every janitor will have access to a third-party hotline. If they see a director cooking the books or turning away a pregnant woman to save a bed for a photo op, they can report it without fear of losing their paycheck." Eli spun his laptop around. "I can stop the blind reporting," he said. "I am building a real-time dashboard. It will be public. It will show the number of beds available and the number of beds occupied for every shelter in the network, updated every 15 minutes. He pointed to the screen. "If a director claims they are full but the dashboard shows 3 green lights, the system flags it immediately. We are going to crowdsource accountability." August, who had been sitting quietly at the head of the table, cleared his throat. He looked tired, but his eyes were bright, unclouded by the fog Lydia had tried to claim he was lost in. "There is one more thing," August said. He tapped his cane on the floor. I want to establish a specific endowment. Let's call it the First Bed Fund. What is that? I asked. It is a priority protocol, August explained. We reserve the first available bed in any facility for young people who have been evicted or rejected by their own families. When a family throws a child away, it is the earliest indicator of a justice failure. We catch them first. We catch them before the street eats them alive. Like we should have caught you. I felt a lump form in my throat. I like that, I whispered. We drove to the Harbor Springs Hope Center, just as the sun was dipping below the horizon. It was the same time of day as that Tuesday night 6 months ago when I had stood shivering in the rain. But the air felt different tonight. It felt cleaner. When we walked through the automatic doors, the lobby was quiet. Sharon was sitting behind the intake desk, scrolling through her phone. When she looked up and saw me, she dropped the device. It clattered onto the desk. "Hannah," she stammered. She looked at my clean shirt. She looked at the visitor badge clipped to my pocket that read, Board Proxy. She looked at August standing behind me. "Hello? Sharon?" I said. I did not say it with anger. I did not need to. The fear in her eyes was enough. I looked at the wall behind her. The brass letters that had spelled out Mercer Caldwell Housing Foundation had been pried off. The wall was scarred where the adhesive had been, but a new, temporary banner was already hung in its place. Caldwell Open Homes Initiative. Next to it, taped to the glass at eye level, was a large poster with the new rules printed in bold. Black type. Refusal of entry while capacity exists is strictly prohibited. The door to the back office opened. A woman stepped out. Her name was Mrs. Higgins. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and sensible shoes. Lydia had fired her 2 years ago for giving extra blankets to a family that had exceeded their quota. We had rehired her an hour ago. Ms. Sanders, Mrs. Higgins said, stepping forward. She held out a heavy ring of keys. "It is done. The VIP suite has been dismantled. We put 4 standard cots in there. Thank you." "Mrs. Higgins," I said. She led us toward the sleeping bay. The frosted glass partition was still there, but the feeling of exclusion was gone. We walked to the corner near the window, the spot where I had seen the empty beds that night. There was a new bed there. It was simple, clean, with a crisp white sheet. Next to it, we had installed a sturdy wooden bench. It wasn't a waiting room chair. It was a piece of furniture meant to last. Screwed into the back of the bench was a small brass plaque. I reached out and traced the letters. For those who were told they were an image problem, there was no name on it. I had insisted on that. If I put my name on it, it became a monument to my ego. Without a name, it was a sanctuary for everyone. I walked back to the lobby. Through the glass doors, I saw a figure standing on the sidewalk. It was my mother. Rebecca was standing exactly where I had stood 6 months ago. She was wearing her expensive coat, but she looked small. She looked cold. She was holding her phone, staring at the building she used to treat like her personal dollhouse. My phone buzzed. I answered it, looking at her through the glass. "You cannot do this to me." "Hannah," Rebecca said. Her voice was tinny, stripped of its usual power. "I built this place. I picked out the paint. I organized the galas. You cannot just lock me out." I looked at the warm lobby. I looked at the empty bench waiting for a tired soul. "You built it with my name, Mom," I said softly. "And you built it with the money meant to keep me safe. You built a stage for yourself and kept the beds empty for an audience that never stayed the night. I am fixing it." I said, "I am turning the stage back into a shelter." "You will regret this," Rebecca said, her voice turning sharp, grasping for one last threat. "When the winter comes, and you realize how hard it is to manage these people, you will miss me. Those wooden benches are not going to be enough. They won't be warm enough." I laughed. It was a short, dry sound. "Mom," I said, "I lived in the back seat of a 20-year-old sedan for 6 months. I scraped ice off the inside of the windshield. Trust me, any bed under a roof is warmer than that." I hung up. I watched her stand there for a moment longer, a ghost of her own making. Then she turned and walked away into the dark, disappearing down the street where the streetlights flickered. I turned back to the lobby. August was leaning on his cane, studying the new plaque on the bench. He looked up as I approached. "You know," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You could have asked for a penthouse. You could have asked for a trust fund payout. You could have walked away with millions and never looked back." I touched the back of the wooden bench. "I didn't want a penthouse," I said. "I know," August said. "You didn't ask for a bed for yourself. You demanded a system for everyone else. That was the moment I knew. That was when I knew I was putting the claws in the right hands." He patted my shoulder. His hand was heavy and warm. "I am going home." "Hannah," he said, "I think I can finally sleep tonight." He walked out, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the tile floor. I sat down on the wooden bench. It was solid. It was real. I sat there in the quiet of the lobby, listening to the hum of the vending machine and the distant sound of traffic. I was not the girl waiting for the police to come and move her along anymore. I was the gatekeeper. Then, the automatic doors slid open. A blast of cold night air rushed in. I looked up. Standing in the doorway was a woman. She was probably 40, but she looked older. She wore a thin windbreaker that was not enough for the weather. In her hand, she clutched a black plastic trash bag. It was the universal luggage of the lost. She looked at me. She looked at the reception desk. She looked ready to apologize, ready to turn around and leave before someone yelled at her. "Excuse me," she whispered, her voice cracking. Is there any space? Or should I go?" I looked at her. I saw myself. I saw the fear, the exhaustion, the shame that burns hot in your chest when you have to ask for help. I stood up. I looked at the large digital screen Eli had installed on the wall behind the desk. The numbers glowed bright green. Beds available. 3. I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had felt in years. I walked over to the door and held it wide open, blocking the wind with my body. "Come in," I said. She hesitated. "Really? Yes," I said. "There is always room here for people who have been told there is no room." She stepped inside. The warmth of the building enveloped her. I let the door slide shut behind us, sealing out the cold, sealing out the past, and finally, for the first time in a long time, locking the safety in. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please leave a comment down below and let me know if you are listening from your car, your kitchen, or maybe even your work break. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please make sure to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and press the hype button to help this story reach even more people who need to hear it.